pleased to introduce Irene Pasina. I hope she's here. Okay, ciao
Yes.
Irene.
Ciao, good morning.
Good morning
Yes.
to all of you, or good night. It depends on where people are actually.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to see you since a long time, and I'm also pleased because since this session of 24 hours conversation is dedicated to the younger generation, I think that I've seen you when you were still student, and I've seen you in your career until now. Irene now is professor in the Ajman University in Dubai. She has been for years in Saudi Arabia, teaching there. She was our PhD student. And the topic of our conversation is women in design.
Yes.
And especially women in such interesting countries as let's say, the MENA. So I'm very interested because I traveled in that area of the world for years, and what I found very interesting, according also on what you are going to talk, is that sometimes we are very superficial when we judge the position of women in design, because it's true that it's strongly divided into architects for men and interior design for women, but this is also something deeply and culturally linked to their anthropological connect on the way that the societies are divided. Man occupies the public powers, and women occupy the inside power. And this is not cheap. This is very strong. So it's not a matter of decoration in interior design, but it is a matter of culture and power about interior design. So my first question is, what is your experience as Italian designer teaching interior design into those countries?
Amazing. It's been very challenging. As you said, I first moved to Saudi and I stayed there for 3 years in Riyadh. And then since last September, I'm here in Ajman University, that it's actually in Ajman, not in Dubai. And it was really an amazing experience because it challenged myself a lot, and I really discovered a word. The first shocking thing for me, it was arriving in Riyadh and being in an only women campus. So my students were all girls. My colleagues, they were all women. And it was really completely different. I mean, I was coming from Milan. I was coming from the Politecnico di Milano. So first impression was strange. But then really you realize that, as you said, it's not just a difference between architecture, interior design, or whatever. It's deeply in the culture, and it's really fascinating. They have this tradition where women, they actually finish the interior space. They are the ones who creates the private space. So as you said, it's not a matter of decoration. It's a matter of gestures, how you behave, how you live the everyday life. So then, of course, nowadays it's even more evident because okay, in Saudi they were all women, but also here in Ajman, the female students, they are more than 3 times the male ones. So they are really the majority, and they are the ones who are going to work then in the field. So these women in interior design, it's a reality. It's a transfer the behavior into the everyday life. Of course, with the skills and the tools that you give them in university, but it's the tradition, it's what they are. And for me, it is really amazing.
Irene, I have another question. Women in these countries are very emancipated,
Yeah.
despite what we think. So, how are young generations, especially female but also men, moving into the design of interior spaces? What they expect? What are their projections? Not necessarily designers, but young generation. How do they use interior spaces?
I think, I mean, if I think about my students, they are hungry. They are passionate. I mean, they really want to possess the space around them, interior and exterior. Is it's like for them it's fluent to transfer their needs, their interest in what they are designing. Um, yeah, you say they are really strong, and you didn't expect it. But it's really refreshing because they teach you plenty of things. It is a two-way learning, and you can really see how they are somehow free to just really challenge the boundaries. They try hard and they go high. So I think also they are really flexible compared, I don't know, if I think about my experience, as I said, coming from Politecnico di Milano, you have a tradition. Our school has an history, and speaking about the masters that we pointed out in our notes, we have our masters. So you feel somehow the weight of these masters behind you. And here it's more free. I'm not saying that they don't have masters, or I'm not saying they don't have inspirations, because they have them, but they work with this inspiration, with this history, with this culture in a very different way, in a more free way, if you want. They mix, they create things that didn't exist before, and they are free to do it. They really want to challenge themselves.
I have another question about it, because sometimes traveling in areas of the world, including, of course, UAE, the feeling is that for them the history is vernacular, and the present days is mostly an Instagram world, shopping images, and creating a sort of international duty freeze. And this for me is quite scaring, because I never understand which design culture they are exploring, how they approach with the contemporary and globalized design. You live also in a country where 90% of the population comes from abroad. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what is their idea of living? What they have in their mind as a, let's say, a cultural reference?
That's a good question, because it has to do a lot with the identity, as we said before. Identity of the people who are designing. Who are them? A very small percentage of people living in the Emirates is actually Emirati. The rest are coming from abroad. So all of them, they are actually bringing their identity, their culture, their tradition here inside the space. Maybe like my students, they are very young, so they were born here in the UAE. But of course, their family, they brought with them the tradition, the different identity. So it is challenging to explain to them that they have to look at the references because they have to know what it was done before, even if it's vernacular. But what they did before, what was it here before you? And now, of course, you have your identity, you have your tradition, you have your culture and your point of view of a very young person. So how you can match this identity that you have with what you can find here. It's not always easy because, as you say, it's the Instagram world. Especially if you think about Dubai, everyone knows Dubai for these huge architectures, amazing interiors, a lot of Instagram points, and so on. But it's not just this duty-free experience, because of course you have the touristic part, the Instagram spots, but then you have plenty of people who are working and living here. We did reference to the interior space, the private space, the houses. They are quite interesting because here you can recognize the houses who are linked to the cultural tradition of the place. So, of course, in a contemporary way, but they are still organized in a traditional way. So you find the houses where there is the public space that is mainly the one for male, and you have the house, the heart of the house that is the space for the women, and it's usually behind. So this really reflects their identities. And then you have the kind of neutral space where the majority of the expats live, like the huge buildings with the apartments or these small villas that are somehow mimicking the American style, so something completely different from the reality of this country. But at the same time, when you are living into this neutral space, you bring into the space your habits, your identity. So maybe this neutrality allows you to be really yourself in a different country, in a different space, with a different context, but you create like a hybrid space between what you are and where you live. So it is really fascinating. And like if we think about the COVID-19 experience, we are trying to do this research with a couple of my colleagues where we asked which were the limits of their interior space, of course. And it's actually interesting because the traditional space, it's the one who reacted the best to this pandemic problem, because it was the space where you had the opportunity to stay with your family, but at the same time have places for all the family members. It's the space that it's more connected to the exterior, because yes, it's harsh, the climate here, but at the same time they live outside. It's amazing because starting from October, when the weather is better, of course, and until late April, beginning of May, they live outside. They live in nature, so they always have the exterior space. For them, it's part of the interior, it's part of the living area. So it is nice that you think that you are modern, offering a neutral space, but when a pandemic comes, you really realize that actually it was the traditional one that was the best. So how can we take back, reuse or reinsert in the design what was there, what was tradition? Here the history I mean, the Emirates were founded in 1971, so it's less than 50 years ago. Of course, they have a very long history before, but never as a country. Starting from the foundation, everything went really fast. So I think somehow now we need to take the moment and the time, the space to uh, analyze and rethink what can be really the future space for such a kind of country. Knowing that you have to deal with a lot of cultural identities and you have to somehow represent all them in what you are designing. And it's not just a matter of Instagram or the trendy space. It's a matter of really working and being functional in what you are designing. And then, yes, women, they are the designers. They are lots. Maybe you don't know them because they are not the famous ones, but trust me, they are really the ones who are shaping the spaces in which we are living.
This is interesting for me because I as you know, uh, first of all, I remember your passion for one of your master that was Gio Ponti, these long lectures about Gio Ponti. And I believe that Gio Ponti is one of the most feminine approach designer in the Italian culture, because the way he was designing the spaces was very related on how really the people live the space, their expectation, let's say their culture, their biographies most of the time. And I found something very similarly strangely in Dubai, no, at the Dubai Women Museum. That is quite a strange place because it was created into the house of this lady, Rafia Gubash. She's a psychiatrist, and all the museum is related on how to try to show the. It's not a feminist museum. It's a museum that watch that country from the female point of view. So my question is this one. Do you think that the female designer point of view is affecting in a certain way the design of the space in UAE? Or did you met some interior designers or female architects that could be considered in the future a master for the girls who are studying interior design there?
Yeah, I don't know, because the problem is that now you cannot consider them masters, but you know that they are the ones who are working in the moment, and then of course in the future they will be maybe recognized as some masters. It's the female point of view. I don't know. I'm thinking about, okay, we have this design studio. It's called Roar Design, and they are all female. The owner and all the women who are working into the studio. So maybe they are not masters nowadays, but they are working to shaping the space, and somehow maybe they will be recognized and they will be a reference for the students. I usually ask my students who are their references here, because for me it's new. I might be don't know them, so I want to understand from them who are they looking to, and of course usually they replies are linked to people who are working here, and we as a European we don't know. My European point of view, it's every day challenged by the replies of my students, and it's a good thing, because as I said, it gives you the opportunity to learn every day something new, and and discover that there is a world outside that is actually always changing, always creating something new, and really fascinating.
I, for me, what is interesting is that, for instance, in UAE there are 9 women ministers. No, and I was
Yeah.
very surprised. One is the Minister of Happiness, but some of them, they are quite into stamps and things like that. And also in the next Expo edition, there will be a pavilion dedicated to women. And so it's evident that that countries is investing in, not, I don't know if in giving powers, but in giving space, in giving attention to the perspective of the women. Did you feel the same, being into the university or into your daily life, and also how you are going to promote this women design point of view?
Yes, I mean, I feel it. Despite what we think that this is a male country, it's actually not. It's not just in the interior design field, but we have a lot of women. They are the majority of the population. So they are like they have some Saudi Vision 2030 or the 2020 year in the Emirates with the Expo. One of the main goals was to empower women in the working field because they are really a powerful resource here. So you can feel it in the everyday life. You can feel that women are a very strong part of the actions here. What can I do, or what I can try to do? It's actually let them speak for themselves. I told you my European point of view. It's actually something that I don't want to repropose. So I want them to let them speak for themselves. We are trying to work, I mean, we have this research group with some of my ex-colleagues in Saudi. I have one colleague in Qatar and I have one in Lebanon. So different countries, but very similar backgrounds. And what we are trying to do is to map the very young generation of designers and give them the space to speak, to talk, to explain what they are doing, and show their works and their interests. So what we are trying to achieve is to create mapping and then an exhibition with a website where you will find these voices, these stories of women. So not what I can tell you, but what they can tell you, because they are the actors here. So our role will be the ones just to create the network, to connect them, to collect data and information, and the stuff that usually creates the research. But then, of course, the most important thing will be their voices, their experiences, with this very young generation of interior designers that are actually female. So what they are working, which are their interests, which are their passions, the projects that they are developing, how they are shaping and transforming the space, the everyday life in which we live.
This is interesting because I think that another keyword is network, because very frequently I've seen on a certain way a sense of isolation, about especially an academical isolation about what they are doing, and there are international, because people arrive, so land in their countries, but then how much the network on from inside to outside is efficient, this is not very clear for me. And what is interesting is that I didn't find a very clearly an evident network between the countries in that area of the world, the Middle East, because mostly it's easier for them to have connections with Politecnico, with UK universities, with American universities.
Yeah.
But then when they should create network, as you are mentioning, between the countries in the area, then it becomes very fragile. So, how do you think, which tools do you need to help them to improve, first of all, the consciousness of the power they have in terms of cultural presence, and also for the future? Because I think there are many magazines I've seen in design magazines,
Yeah.
and they are quite sensitive to women and to in both, I could say, in a very balanced way. But for instance, in research, in academic research, how they produce, and if are they producing research together, not necessarily between women, I'm saying now, generally speaking, between the university. What is your experience of sharing researches together?
It's not easy. The research, okay, it's kind of a problem. Like university here are pushing a lot towards the Scopus ranked journals, and it's something that in our field it's not really the must. I mean, when you do a research, it's not just writing a paper. It's actually going and look what's happening around you and try to create experiences and so on. So it is not easy. It's not easy to build a network. It's not easy also to look for information, because sometimes you cannot find them in the traditional or institutional spaces. You just have to go and ask directly to collect feedback. So I don't know, if you think when you do a research, you collect articles and chapters and books and so on. But first we have a barrier, the language. If I don't speak Arabic, how can I really find some information's there? So creating a network, it's fundamental, because I'm working with my Arabic speakers colleagues, because we can join forces. I can look for the English things, and you will help me with the Arabic ones. That maybe they are the most interesting one, because they are directly explaining to me the things. But for me, they are unknown because I don't speak Arabic. And then it's really difficult to analyze what you collect. So to give them a frame, a research strongness. So it's not easy at all to do research here, or at least you have to change your perception of the research work.
Yes,
And
sure.
you need to be flexible and try to do the things with what you have.
That it's interesting how to change the paradigms, but I think that is because you are there, because you're traveling, but also is because of the time we are living. That is true.
Yes.
The big effort is exactly to design the new paradigms of design,
Yes.
because of pandemic, but not necessarily because of the pandemic. It was just an accelerator, let's say, of the conditions, but we were already inside an amazing revolution. Okay, so
Yeah.
Irene, I really thank you. I hope to see you soon when you will be back in
Hopefully.
Italy. And I
Hopefully
would,
soon.
and yes, I hope that the flights are moving. And I would like to thank you and leave the floor to my colleague.